take a trip up the Corrib on the Corrib Princess. And we're in the two little vines here, the two leprechauns. And the nephew. Mind, in off the road, lads. Off the road, off the road, off the road. Get off the road. Stay off the road. And I have the nephew as well. And his girlfriend.
Hi guys, how are you?
And as we're leaving a part of Galway called Wood Quay. And Wood Quay was once a timber pier, hence the name, and the stone pier we see here today was built in 1894. And this was the same year they started building the Galway-Clifton railway line, of which only 3 pillars remain today, as you can see there to our right and behind us now at the moment as we turn around. The Galway-Clifton railway line served West Galway for only 40 years and closed down in 1935 because the company was losing money. It is said that all the steel on this bridge was sold for the tiny sum of £10 to the German Krupp's company. Hitler was stockpiling steel in these days to manufacture arms for his rapidly growing army. And the 2 pillars we see closest together, well, they were in fact the drawbridge pillars, and they linked the River Corrib to the Eglinton Canal. The Eglinton Canal was opened in 1848, and finally it was possible to sail all the way from Galway Bay all the way up to Congar Ashford Castle, and there in County Mayo. And that's a distance of around 36 miles. However, the canal was closed in 1954, and all the remaining drawbridges were replaced by concrete ones. And also here in the background you will see Galway Cathedral. And Galway Cathedral was built on the site of the old Galway jail, and they started building it in the early 1960s, and it was completed in 1965. It was officially opened and blessed by the late Cardinal Cushing of Boston. The building is made from Galway limestone, which was brought down from the Anglican quarry on the banks of Lower Lough Corrib. And in fact, Galway became the 3rd most important port in the British Isles after London and Bristol during the height of its prosperity in the Middle Ages. However, the town was nearly totally destroyed by fire in the 17th century and was again rocked by the potato famine of the 19th century. It's only the last 50 years that Galway has recovered, and is now once again one of the fastest growing cities in Europe. And there are a number of theories to why the town was named Galway. One is that a daughter of a famous Norman chieftain drowned in the River Corrib here, and that her name was Galway. But historians agree that the most credible theory is that in fact it comes from the town's Irish name, Galway, and when translated means a stony riverbed. And as you can see, we're now approaching Galway's newest bridge, called the Quincentennial Bridge, or locally here in Galway it's called the New Bridge. Right here on board the Corrib Princess, for obvious reasons, we call it the Low Bridge. And this bridge was opened in 1987 as part of the celebrations of Galway being 500 years a city. And to the right of here at the moment, you will see the ruins or the remains of Terryland Castle. And Terryland comes from the Irish Tír-Ghealach, or the land of the island. The new bridge was in fact built through the castle, and the castle was built by the de Burgos in 1484. Until then they had lived in Galway city, but the mayor of Galway had evicted them in that year. It was the de Burgos who in fact founded Galway city itself in the 13th century. And another story about this castle is that of the O'Flahertys, who owed rent on their Ochnanure castle in Uachtarard, which seems to have been known by the de Burgos at the time. There was great bitterness between both clans, and of course the O'Flahertys were out for revenge. The de Burgos sent their son out one day to collect the rent from the O'Flahertys, and the O'Flahertys, they welcomed him in, they wined him, they dined him, and they entertained him, and then they beheaded the poor devil. And they put his head in a bag, and a servant threw the bag onto the courtyard of Terryland Castle with a note in the bag saying, "This is the O'Flahertys' rent for the year with interest." The de Burgos later put a sign up on the front gate saying, "God protect us from the ferocious O'Flahertys," and the O'Flaherty clan have kept that name right down till this day in Galway, in fact. And to the right, both there at the moment, even though it doesn't look like an island, but in fact it is, and it's called Jordan's Island. And it got its name because in the years 1651 and 52 we had a religious sect here in Galway called the Anabaptists, and they looked on the river Corrib as the equivalent to the river Jordan. They would baptize their followers in the stream just behind the island here, and that's where Galway city gets its water from today in fact. The Anabaptists were also associated with Cromwell at the time, and therefore they were very much disliked here in Galway. And this is Dangan House, and Dangan House is famous because it was once the home of Sir Richard Martin. Sir Richard was better known as Humanity Dick because of his kindness to animals, and he was a founder member of the RSPCA, or the Royal Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. And when Sir Richard was asked why he preferred animals to humans, he replied, "An ox cannot hold a gun." Well, he was very fond of the gun himself because it is said that he shot several people, especially those who he considered who were cruel to animals. And the small church-like house here also on our left is all that really remains of the original Martin domain, and this was their tea house, or today is simply called the Folly, and of course the Folly meaning an historical building of very little importance. It is thought that some of the stones used to build the structure were stolen from Minlaw Castle, coming up on our right and taken across the river by boat. And also here coming up on our left you will see a concrete platform, and this is the staging point for the annual Galway Regatta, and behind this platform are the football and soccer training grounds for NUIG. And coming up on our right hand side there at the moment you will see what is perhaps one of the most interesting features on the banks of the River Corrib. And this is the soon to be restored Menlough Castle. And the castle was originally built as a house for the Coleman family in the 1500s. It was taken over by the Blake family in the 1600s, and they built the newest castle-like section, which is now closest to the river. As we pass by the castle here, if we look back towards the west gable end, you will see the difference between the light coloured stone the Colemans used to build the original house and the darker coloured stone the Blakes used to extend it. The castle itself was destroyed by fire in the year 1910, and there was a huge mystery associated with that awful night till the 1970s. It was then that the only survivor of the fire wrote to the late Mr. Maurice Sample, and Mr. Sample was a solicitor here in Galway till quite recently. This lady's name was Anne Brown, and in her letter she told this story. On the awful night, there were only 3 people in the castle, as Lord and Lady Blake were away in London, where Lord Blake was about to undergo a cataract operation. Ellen Blake, who was their only daughter, was the only member of the family in the castle on the awful night. Anne Brown tried to place a lit lamp in Ellen's room, but Ellen totally objected and she took the lamp herself. Anne Brown and Adela Early, who was the other servant girl, went to bed in the attic shortly afterwards. It was Anne who realised the castle was on fire, and she awoke Delia, who completely ignored her at first. Anne opened the bedroom door only to witness the staircase collapsing. Both Delia and Anne had no choice but to jump from the attic window, but unfortunately poor Delia died upon hitting the ground. Anne herself awoke later in a horse cart, as she was taken to the infirmary here in Galway, and at 16 years of age Anne spent 5 months in hospital. She later emigrated to America, and the Blakes left Menlo altogether, and they went to England. And as a matter of interest, Anne Brown lived in New York till her death in 1976. And another one of the Blake family who was very famous was Valentine Blake, or Lord Blake himself. Valentine loved to buy stuff, but he never paid for half of it. He owed an awful lot of money, and there was a warrant, or writ, issued for his arrest. And in those days one could never be arrested on a Sunday. So every Sunday Valentine would head off to the clubhouse in Eyre Square, in the heart of Galway City, and there he would wine and dine till almost midnight. He would then jump into his coach and race back and be in the safety of his castle just before the stroke of midnight. This earned Valentine the nickname Sunday Boy Blake, or later he was called the Cinderella of Galway. However, Valentine eventually got tired of his cat and mouse game, and he sought advice from his solicitors, and they told him to become a member of Parliament. If he was a member of Parliament, he would never have to pay a penny of his debts. But first, of course, he had to be elected. And again he found another loophole. He could canvass from a boat as long as he did not dock, because he could never be arrested while on the water in those days. So Valentine would jump into his boat each morning, head up down to Wood Quay, and there he would anchor about 50 feet away from the pier, and he would canvass away and speech away to his heart's content. And believe it or believe it not, Valentine Blake was eventually elected as a member of Parliament by the people of Galway in the late 19th century. We are now in the intersection of the River Corrib, and the water is approximately 40 feet in depth here. On the 4th of September of the year 1858, a great disaster took place here when an open boat sank and drowned, and it was a small village on shore on the Corrib.
Perfect. Perfect. I couldn't have done better myself. Fabulous store.
It's about time.